Hi everybody. Now in this video we are going to discuss about the chapter called as the chemical coordination and integration. Chemical coordination and integration. In the previous video we discussed about the pituitary gland and the hormones that are produced from different lobes of the pituitary gland. Anterior lobe, intermediate lobe and posterior lobe. And now in this video we are going to discuss about the most important another gland called as the thyroid gland. So thyroid gland is the largest endocrine gland that is present in our body. It is the largest endocrine gland that is present in our body. That's the point you have to remember. The largest endocrine gland that is present in our body is the thyroid gland. And you know, this particular thyroid gland can store the hormones in large quantities. It can produce the hormones and it can store those hormones in large quantities even for about 2 months. For about 2 months, they can store the hormones that are produced in the thyroid gland. And now, if you see this particular gland, thyroid gland, it is formed from the endoderm of the embryo. Endoderm of the embryo. Please remember that. From which layer it is formed means it is formed from the endoderm of the embryo. Endoderm of the embryo. Now, where is it located? It is located in the neck region, we say. Okay, it is located in the neck region, anterior part. Okay, anterior part of the larynx. Now, here, if this is the larynx, if we say, okay, if this is the larynx. So here on the anterior part, you will be seeing the thyroid gland that is present. Okay, this is the trachea we are saying, and here this is the trachea. Okay, now here the thyroid gland is present on the anterior lobe, okay, or sorry, anterior part of the trachea or the neck region we say. And this gland, okay, this gland that is there on the trachea or in the neck region, or otherwise we say directly as larynx, okay, larynx. Now here it is present in the neck region on the larynx we are saying. If you are looking at the structure of the thyroid gland, it is of 2 lobes. Okay, it is of 2 lobes, and these 2 lobes are connected by a small structure. Okay, they are connected by a small structure. This structure is called as what now? Isthmus. Okay, this structure is called as the isthmus. Okay, we have to remember this word isthmus. Okay, isthmus is connecting the 2 lobes of the thyroid gland. Okay, the 2 lobes of the thyroid gland are connected with each other by a connective tissue like structure called as what? Isthmus. Okay, isthmus is connecting. And now if you are seeing the thyroid gland, it is made up of different cells. Okay, it is made up of different cells which are richly supplied with the blood vessels. Now here, as we said, it is connected by what? Isthmus. Okay, it is connected by the isthmus, and it is composed of thyroid follicle cells. These are the first type of cells which are present in what? Thyroid gland. Thyroid follicle cells. Okay, thyroid follicle cells are there present in the thyroid gland. And at the same time, there are also other cells called as parafollicular cells, and in short we are calling them as C cells. Okay, we call them as C cells. So here we should remember that the thyroid gland is of 2 lobes which are connected by a structure called as isthmus, and the thyroid gland which is having 2 types of cells present in it. First type of cells are called as what? Thyroid follicle cells, and the other type of cells are called as parafollicular cells. And these cells, in short, we are calling them as what? C cells we are calling them as. Okay, we are calling them as C cells. And now this thyroid gland, okay, this thyroid gland is being stimulated. Okay, now if you are taking the thyroid gland, okay, let us say that this is the thyroid gland. So when we are taking this thyroid gland is stimulated by a hormone that is released. Okay, there is a hormone that is released from a pituitary gland. We are calling it as what? Thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, thyroid stimulating hormone. From where this thyroid stimulating hormone is released? It is released from the pituitary gland. Okay, so here we should remember that the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland is releasing a hormone called as thyroid stimulating hormone. And remember, this thyroid stimulating hormone is also called as thyrotrophin. Okay, it is also called as the thyrotrophin. Please remember this word. Okay, thyrotrophin. Okay, please remember this word called as thyrotrophin. Okay, thyrotrophin is another name for thyroid stimulating hormone. This thyroid stimulating hormone is stimulating what? Thyroid gland. When the thyroid gland is stimulated, now the thyroid gland is producing three different types of hormones. It is producing three different types of hormones. So what are those three different types of hormones produced by the thyroid gland? The first one is called as thyroxine. Okay, the first one is called as thyroxine. Otherwise, we can call this thyroxine as what? Tetraiodothyronin. Tetraiodothyronin. So tetra means we know it is 4. So in short, we are calling this as what now? T4. Okay, we will be calling it as T4. Okay, tetraiodothyronin. And the other hormone that is produced is triiodothyronin. Tri means we know it is 3. So triiodothyronin. So here it is represented as with the small way, okay, or in a short way, it is represented as T3. Okay, we are calling it as T3. And the last one, the third hormone that is produced is Thyrocalcitonin. Okay, Thyrocalcitonin. So here we should remember that the first two hormones, okay, tetraiodothyronin and triiodothyronin, these two hormones are produced from the thyroid follicle cells. Okay, thyroid follicle cells that are present in the thyroid gland. The first two hormones, tetraiodothyronin and triiodothyronin. Otherwise, we are in short we are calling it as what? T4, T3. Okay, respectively. T4 and T3. So T4 and T3 are produced from which cells present in the thyroid gland? Thyroid follicle cells. So thyroid follicles will be producing T4 and T3 hormones. And now the other one is called as the Thyrocalcitonin. This is the third hormone. So Thyrocalcitonin is produced from the C cells called as what? Parafollicular cells. Okay, parafollicular cells. Okay, Thyrocalcitonin, it is produced from the parafollicular cells. Otherwise, in short, we are calling it as C cells. Now, the point is that these three hormones are produced from the thyroid gland, we are saying. And remember, a very important point we have to remember is that now, in short or indirectly, we always represent the hormone that is produced, from the thyroid gland, we always highlight it as what? Thyroxine. Okay, we always highlight it as thyroxine. But we will not use these words called as what? T4 and T3. Why? It's because please remember that this hormone produced by the thyroid gland is formed from one amino acid called as the tyrosine. Please remember, it's a very important one that you have to keep in mind. Okay, there is one amino acid called as what? Tyrosine. So tyrosine is one of those 20 amino acids. Tyrosine. So this tyrosine, let me put it as to remember it very carefully. Let us remember very carefully that saying that it is a amino acid. Tyrosine is what now? It is an amino acid. So to this tyrosine, what is joined? If there are three iodines, okay, if there are three iodines that are attached, we call this as what now? Triiodothyronin. Or otherwise, if there are three iodine, we are saying, okay, if it is now the tyrosine which is now connected or attached or joined with 4 iodine, okay, molecules, okay, 4 iodine, okay, if it is attached with 4 iodine, we are calling it as what now? T4. Okay, we are calling this as T4 and we are calling this as T3. Okay, we are calling this as the T3. T4, T3. Now, I hope you understood why it is represented as T3 and why it is represented as T4. T4 means what? There are 4 iodine that are attached to what? One amino acid called as what? Tyrosine. If it is T3, triiodothyronin, it is with tyrosine, an amino acid with which 3 iodines are joined with each other. Okay, so here that's why the names are given as what? T3 and T4. But another point we have to remember is that among these two, T3, okay, T3 is more active. It is more active, and at the same time it is produced in less quantity. Okay, it is produced in less quantity. It is more active, but it is produced in less quantity. But if you see the T4, okay, it is produced in more quantity, Okay, it is produced in more quantity but not more active as T3. It is not as active as T3. So here what happens is that these two, okay, there is now something that is happening in the liver, okay, or in the kidney, okay, liver and in kidney. What happens is that this particular T4, okay, which is produced in large quantities, it is now from this T4, what we are saying, the T4 means what? It is 4 represents what? 4 iodine molecules. So from these 4 iodine molecules, one iodine molecule is removed. Okay, one iodine molecule is removed. And once the iodine, okay, once one iodine is removed, okay, once one iodine is removed, now the T4 means what? The tetraiodothyronine. T4 is now immediately changing into what now? Triiodothyronine. Triiodothyronine. So remember that the T4 that is called as the tetraiodothyronine, it is now produced in large quantities but not more active. But what is happening? It is converted into T3. Okay, it is converted into T3 which is more active. How it is converted or where it is converted? It is now, this is T4 is carried to the liver or into the kidneys. Okay, into the liver or into the kidneys. In the liver, in the kidneys and even some other tissues also. In some other tissues also, the T4 which is tetraiodothyronine is losing one iodine. It is losing one iodine and it is converted into T3 which is more active. So that's why we directly or we simply call it as what? The thyroxine which is produced from the thyroid gland. That's why we will not highlight or insist saying that there are two hormones like T4 and T3, because even the T4 is converted into what now? T3. So that's why in simple we always highlight it as what? Thyroxine is the hormone that is produced from the thyroid gland, we say, okay, from the thyroid gland. And now if you are seeing the other hormone, okay, if you are seeing the other hormone, that is the Thyrocalcitonin, okay, Thyrocalcitonin. But before we go for this Thyrocalcitonin, let us see in simple what are the functions of this particular hormone called as thyroxine. Okay, what are the functions of this hormone called as what? The first one, thyroxine. Now if you see here the functions of thyroxine, it regulates the metabolic rate. You know the metabolism that occurs in our body. The sum total of all the chemical reactions that take place in our body is called as metabolism. So for this metabolic rate, we also call it as BMR. Basal metabolic rate. Okay, so it regulates the metabolic rate. Thyroxine is involved in metabolism. That's the simple statement we can remember. It helps in normal metabolism that to take place inside this cell. So we are saying it as what? It helps in regulating the metabolic rate, and it stimulates the protein synthesis. Thyroxine is also involved in what? In stimulating the protein synthesis. So if there is protein synthesis, that's why we say that the child will be growing how? He will be growing very healthily. The growth and development of the child is seen very healthily because of what? The protein synthesis. Okay, so here thyroxine is involved in what now? Stimulating the protein synthesis for growth and development of the body, and at the same time it maintains, okay, body temperature. Because when the thyroxine is produced, it is now stimulating heat production also in the body. Please remember that this thyroxine, when it is produced, it also produces heat, or otherwise we can come like this. When metabolism is taking place in our body cells, due to the metabolic reactions, what is also taking place? Heat is produced. So this heat is helping in maintaining what? Body temperature. This heat helps in maintaining body temperature. So directly we can say that thyroxine is helping in maintaining what? Body temperature. Thyroxine is helping in maintaining body temperature. And another very important thing that we have to keep in mind is the fourth one, called as helps in metamorphosis. So helps in metamorphosis. What do you mean by the word metamorphosis? The cyclic changes, the changes that occur in an organism. Okay, in its life cycle, the changes that takes place in an organism, we call it as what? Metamorphosis. So suppose if we are taking the, okay, if you are taking the larva, okay, larva of a tadpole, okay, larva of the tadpole, okay, of the tadpole. So we know that larva of the tadpole means now the tadpole is nothing but which will be changing into what? The frog. Okay, it will be changing into what? Frog. But here very important thing is that if we are removing, please remember this, if we are removing the thyroid gland, if we are removing the thyroid gland from the tadpole, okay, from the tadpole, that tadpole cannot change into what? Develop into what? Frog. This is very important thing we have to keep in mind. It tells that it is helping in growth and development or helps in metamorphosis. Please remember this. It's very important one. So, if we are removing the thyroid gland from the tadpole, it cannot develop into a frog. That is, development of a frog from the tadpole is nothing but we also call it as what? In its life cycle we call it as what? Metamorphosis. So, for metamorphosis, what is important is thyroid gland, which means thyroxine. Thyroxine is helping in what? The conversion or development of tadpole into a frog. Thyroxine is produced from where? Thyroid gland. You remove the thyroid gland, now what is not produced? Thyroxine is not produced. So, tadpole cannot change into a frog. That is point. That point we have to keep in mind. And increases the action of what? Neurotransmitters. Okay, increases the action of neurotransmitters. So here we know the neurotransmitters will be helping in carrying the messages. Okay, messages from one cell to another cell or to different parts of our body. That is regarding we are talking about the nervous system. Okay, nerves, neurons. They carry what? Nerve impulses from one part of the body to another part of the body, or they bring up responses. So in that there are some neurotransmitters, means chemicals which are there, which will be carrying these messages. So very simple or important ones that we have to remember is the adrenaline. Okay, adrenaline is a neurotransmitter, and noradrenaline. Okay, noradrenaline, this is also a neurotransmitter. Okay, these two are what now? Neurotransmitters. So they help in what? Carrying the nerve impulses. So for which what is important now? There is the thyroxine, which increases the action of what? Neurotransmitters like adrenaline and noradrenaline. And remember, adrenaline and noradrenaline are also, they are formed from the amino acid called as tyrosine. So the next one, if you see, it is called as the Thyrocalcitonin. So Thyrocalcitonin is also produced from where? From the thyroid gland. So we said that Thyrocalcitonin is produced from the cells called as what? C cells. Okay, cells called as C cells that are present in the thyroid gland, or these are parafollicular cells. We call them as what? Parafollicular cells. Otherwise, in short, we are calling them as C cells. So C cells present in what? Thyroid gland are responsible for producing what? The thyrocalcitonin. Okay, thyrocalcitonin. So thyrocalcitonin, in short, it is also known, okay, also otherwise it is known as what? Calcitonin. Please remember, it is otherwise called as the calcitonin. Okay, another word for thyrocalcitonin is, in short, we call it as calcitonin. Okay, calcitonin. Now, this particular hormone is secreted when calcium levels are increasing in our blood. Okay, when the calcium is increasing in the blood, in such cases, thyrocalcitonin will be released. What is the function of this thyrocalcitonin? It suppresses the release of calcium ions from the bones. So we know that bones are now containing one important mineral called as calcium. So calcium is continuously, it will be released in sufficient quantity. It is produced in or it is released into the blood sufficiently only. But sometimes this calcium may be released from the bones in more quantity, which is not good. So in such cases, thyrocalcitonin will be now suppressing the release of calcium ions from the bones. It will be suppressing the release of calcium ions from the bones, so that it is now controlling the amount of calcium that is there present in the blood. Now we should remember that this calcitonin is now functioning opposite to another gland called as parathyroid gland. Parathyroid gland. Parathyroid gland is involved in producing the or secreting this calcium and releasing it into the blood. But when the calcium levels are increasing, it is this particular calcitonin which will be controlling what now? The concentration, the amount of blood that is produced, okay, the amount of calcium that is produced in the blood or present in the blood. So here we have to remember that Thyrocalcitonin is another hormone that is produced from where? It is produced from the thyroid gland. Cells that are present in the thyroid gland responsible for producing thyrocalcitonin is C cells, and another name for thyrocalcitonin is, we are calling it as what? Calcitonin. So we should not get confused when if it is given as thyrocalcitonin and calcitonin. Both are the same. And now we will look at the thyroid disorders. Okay, we will look at the thyroid disorders. Means what happens when a particular hormone, okay, or we are talking about the thyroid hormone, that is thyroxine, when it is produced in more quantities and when it is produced in less quantities, then what is required? Okay, every hormone, we already studied in the very beginning that the hormones are produced in trace amounts, very minute amounts, but their action is incredible. Okay, they perform and bring up many, okay, activities or physiological activities that are taking place and should be taking place in our body. So these trace amounts should not increase nor decrease. So here, if you are looking at the thyroid disorders, okay, if you are looking at the thyroid disorders, hyperthyroidism means hyperactivity of the thyroid gland. When the thyroid is producing more amount of the thyroxine, when the thyroid is producing more amount of thyroxine, we call it as that it is leading to the hyperthyroidism. Means it may lead to some disorder called as what? Exophthalmic goitry. Okay, exophthalmic goitry, or otherwise it is called as what? Graves disease. Okay, it is also called as the Grave disease, or otherwise there are other names that we should keep in mind called as Basedow's disease and Paris disease. Okay, Basedow's disease and Paris disease. So apart from all this, we may be only coming across the common word called as what? Exophthalmic goitry. So this is what are the characteristics of this particular, okay, hormone. If it is produced in less quantity, it will lead to what? Exophthalmia. Means what? The eyes will be protruding eyes. The eyes will be, okay, enlarged in size due to the accumulation of fluid behind them. Okay, due to the accumulation of fluid behind them. So here exophthalmia means what? Protruding of eyes. Okay, protruding of eyes. Okay, protruding of eyes, we call it as the, okay, exophthalmia. Okay, exophthalmia. So it is due to the accumulation of what? The fluid. And in these, okay, individuals, they also lose weight. Okay, there will be loss of weight. Okay, there will be loss of weight, and because of the increase in this particular hormone, their body temperature also will be slightly increased. Okay, their body temperature will be slightly increased, and there will be rapid heartbeat. Okay, there will be rapid heartbeat, and they will be always suffering with restlessness. Okay, restlessness. So this is about what? When the hormone is produced in more quantity from the thyroid gland. When thyroxine is produced in more amounts, then what is required? These are the characteristics that we can see in that particular individual. Especially the first one you have to remember, that is exophthalmia. That's why the name is given as what? Exophthalmic goitry. Excessive production of this thyroxine hormone. Excessive production of this thyroxine hormone, we call it as goitry. Okay, please remember, goitry. Excessive production of thyroxine hormone is called as goitry. So when it is produced in more quantity, it is leading to the most important one here is exophthalmia. Okay, protruding of eyes due to the accumulation of fluid behind the eyes. And now hypothyroidism, hypoactivity means what? When the hormone called as thyroxine is produced in very less quantities than what is required, it may lead to what? Cretinism. Okay, very important one, cretinism. Cretinism is seen very clearly in the infants, or it is seen in the infants. So we have to remember and you have to differentiate, because there is another one that occurs in the adults. Another one which occurs in the adults we are going to discuss. So whenever you are coming across the word cretinism, it is a disorder that is caused due to the less secretion of what? Thyroxine. So that's why we are calling it as what? Hypothyroidism. When the thyroxine hormone is produced in less quantity in infants. In infants, that is a disease named as what? cretinism. These are the characteristics that we can see. These are the characteristics. In that particular person, we will be seeing that the growth is very slow growth, reduced metabolic rate, and the heartbeat will be very slow, and their belly will be like pod shape, pod belly we call it as, okay, their stomach is like a pod shape, and they have a pigeon chest, okay, it is like protruded little front, okay, so that's why we call them as we call it as what, pigeon chest. So here we came across the first one, hypothyroidism, that is now called as what, the exophthalmic tree, or otherwise Graves disease we are calling it as, or otherwise we are calling it as Basedow disease or Paris disease. And these are the characteristics of that particular individual who is suffering with the hyperthyroidism. Then we have seen hypothyroidism. In that only the first one we have seen called as what, cretinism, which is clearly seen in the infants, showing those characteristics which we have seen. And now we are going to see the next one, that is coming under the hypothyroidism. And now the next one, if you are seeing under the hypothyroidism, the disease is called as mixed edema. Okay, the disease is called as mixed edema, or otherwise it is called as Gulch disease. Otherwise it is called as Gulch disease. Under the hypothyroidism means what? When there is deficiency, when there is less production of what? Thyroxine hormone. The first disease that we have seen is what? Cretinism, that is seen in the infants. That is seen in the infants. Infants means what? The children who are still depending upon what? The milk of the mother. Okay, their growth will not be seen nicely. Okay, they will not show good growth and development of the body. So that is identified as what? Cretinism in infants. And when there is a deficiency of thyroxine hormone, that we are calling here as hypothyroidism in the adults now. Okay, this is in the adults. Okay, this is in the adults. So in the adults now we are calling it as what? Mixed edema. Okay, mixed edema or Gulch disease. Okay, mixed edema, or otherwise we are calling it as Gulch disease. This is a disease due to the deficiency of thyroxine observed or identified in the adults. This disease is characterized by puffy appearance. Okay, they will be showing as puffy appearance due to the fat accumulation under the subcutaneous tissue. Under the subcutaneous tissue. Okay, they will be having puffy appearance. Okay, puffy appearance. And if you see the characteristics, they have low metabolic rate, lacks alertness. They will not be much alert. Okay, slow heart rate, low body temperature, and retarded sexual development. Retarded sexual development means that sexual development will be slowed down or completely stopped. So these are some of the characteristics that we see in the deficiency of what? The thyroxine hormone in the adults. In the adults, and in which we are calling it as the disease as what? Mixed edema. Okay, in such cases we are calling the disease as mixed edema or Gulch disease. Okay, mixed edema or Gulch disease. And there is another one which is also caused due to the deficiency of the thyroxine hormone produced from the thyroid gland. Otherwise we are calling it as what? Simple goitry. Simple goitry means what? Enlargement of the thyroid gland. Enlargement of the thyroid gland. So it is characterized by what? Thyroid enlargement. Okay, it is characterized by the thyroid enlargement. So when there is a simple goitry, okay, thyroid enlargement, please remember, it may, if it is in children, it will lead to cretinism. If it is in adults, it will lead to mixed edema. Okay, it will lead to mixed edema. So this point we have to remember. Okay, due to simple goitry, okay, there is a treatment for this. But otherwise, if the treatment is not taken, if it is neglected, then this simple goitry may lead to, if it is in infants, it may lead to cretinism. If it is in adults, it may lead to mixed edema or otherwise Gulch disease we are calling it as. And apart from all these, there is one important disorder which we call it as Hashimoto's disease. Very, very important one. Please remember this. Hashimoto's disease. What is this Hashimoto's disease? It is also caused due to the destruction of the thyroid gland, which cannot produce the thyroxine hormone. Thyroxine is not produced because of what? The thyroid gland is destroyed. How the thyroid gland is destroyed means it is by our own immune system. Okay, by our own immune system. So we have one system called as what? Immune system, which is always involved in protecting our body from various microbes, disease causing pathogens. Resistance against the disease is brought by this particular system present in our body, called as immune system. But this immune system, the special characteristic of the immune system is it can easily identify self cells from non-self cells. Self cells from non-self cells means what? It can easily discriminate or identify or differentiate which are its own body cells and which are the foreign cells that are entering into the body. So that is the most important characteristic of our immune system. It can identify what? Self cells from non-self cells. Non-self cells means the microbes, pathogens which are trying to cause the disease causing microbes. But here, in the case of autoimmunity, please remember this word, autoimmunity. Our immune system loses the property of identifying self cells from the non-self cells. It loses the property of identifying the self cells from the non-self cells. In such cases, our own immune system produces the cells which will go and destroy the thyroid gland. Okay, which will destroy the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland is destroyed by our own immune system. So when our own immune system is destroying the thyroid gland cannot produce the thyroxine. So it may lead to a disease which we are calling it as what? Hashimoto's disease. So such diseases are called as what? Autoimmunity. We are calling it as autoimmunity. When our own immune system destroys our own body cells, it is called as autoimmunity. One of it is the destruction of the thyroid gland, and it leads to a disease called as what? Hashimoto's disease. So here, these are all the diseases that we have to remember. Okay, these are all the diseases that we have to remember. As we have studied Paris disease or Basedow disease, or we said that it is exophthalmia or Graves disease, the first one, when the thyroxine is produced in more quantity, we highlighted it as hyperthyroidism. Hypothyroidism means when there is deficiency of thyroxine. We said cretinism in infants. And the second one we said that it is mixed edema or Graves disease, it is in adults. And the third one we said simple goitry, it may be deficiency of what? The thyroxine, which leads to thyroid enlargement. Please remember here, thyroid enlargement means the follicle cells will be increasing in more in number so that they can produce more amount of thyroxine. That's why the thyroid gland will be increased, we say. So this is the third disease, and the last one, Hashimoto's disease, which is in which the thyroid gland is destroyed by autoimmunity. So these are the points we should keep in mind in this video and try to remember all these points. Thank you so much.